So you get a traditional introduction this week because we are back in our old format because we have a guest with us again, as we try and do every month, bring a guest on and be a part of the conversation. And so welcome back to the Desert Well, where we gather around the well that is Jesus, both to drink deeply from his gospel, the good news he gives to you, to me, to the world, but also to be a part of the conversation. And man, I said this before we started, but it feels different, Derek. It feels very different. Like I know you told me my voice sounded the same last time after we were done recording in person, but I'm in front of my computer screen, and I feel like I'm preaching to this invisible audience of people that are on the other side of this thing. Whereas when we're sitting in a room, it's totally different. But anyway, we're
this is
here.
my comfort zone.
Derek's like, can we go back to this, please? This is more what I would desire, all of those sort of things. So we're excited because we have a guest with us today, Miss Leah Abel. We will let her introduce herself, but Leah is going to be the one that is leading our planning committee, our planning team here at Lamb of God. And so you've heard me say it in worship, I believe. I spoke about it at the voters meeting that we will be entering into strategic planning in 2026. And as we record this, at least on the 8th of April, we're a couple of weeks away from that actually starting, which is crazy. Crazy to think that that is just around the corner. But very, very, very exciting things. Great reasons. Maybe if you're suspect of that today, or you're skeptical of it today, I hope that after our conversation is done, you'll not just see why this is something that will be good for us as a family faith, as a church, but maybe even perhaps excited about it too. So, Leah, I'll let you introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? How'd you get to do what you do today? All those sort of things.
Yeah, so my name is Leah Abel, and whenever people ask me where I'm from, I feel like, does that mean where do I live? Where am I from? So I'm going to give you all of it, okay? So I live in Littleton, Colorado, where my husband serves as a pastor of an LCMS congregation out here, a sister congregation of yours. And so serve out here, we've been out here for 13 years now, which I can't quite believe. Before that time, I was in Florida, which is actually where I met my husband. We served on staff at a church and school there together, which I can tell you more about that part later. But when people say, where are you from? I always feel like I need to say, I'm from Iowa. I'm from the fields of gold, all the places. If you've seen Field of Dreams, that farm is 15 minutes from my parents' farm. So grew up in a tiny little LCMS church in the middle of nowhere. That's kind of that's where I'm from a little bit. You want me to say a little bit more about kind of how I ended up where I am and the kind of work that I do?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I went to Concordia Seward way back when and studied to be a director of Christian education, and then was sent to Florida, did an internship there at a church and school, and loved it and thought this is what I was made to do. Something about all the different things you get to do in ministry, as a DCE, probably as a pastor as well, the different ways you get to serve families and leaders. And I did, oversaw all the education ministries. It was a larger church and school. We had about 500 kids in the K-8 school, and then another 250 or so in our preschool. And then it was a really interesting congregation because we had literally a hedge between the playground and a retirement community of Lutherans called the Lutheran Haven. And so it was this really crazy, amazing experience where I got to see and experience a lot of ministry with education and assimilation and volunteer and all kinds of cool stuff. And so I really had no intent to ever give that up because I loved it so much. And a few years into my time there, we got a vicar, and this congregation got a vicar every year. And this one was the first single vicar that I had seen. And I basically ignored him for a while. Apart from meetings, I was professional. I talked to him in meetings, but I was, thought he seemed like a good guy, but I was had no interest in dating the vicar and leaving my calling. And as God would have things, eventually I gave up. I knew I was in trouble when my senior pastor said, maybe you should think about dating the vicar. And I thought, this is problematic because he is my boss, and this would mean a lot of things. And so eventually that all kind of happened. And in God's goodness and kindness, my husband was called back to that congregation to do a mission plant. He was not my husband yet. My boyfriend, I guess, at the time, maybe, came back, and everything happily ever after and all that stuff. And so I was on staff there at that church and school for 11 years. And then 13 years ago, my husband received a call to this congregation out here in Colorado. And here we are. And so amongst that time and kind of being here, I was staying at home with our young one, early days when we were here, and kind of trying to figure out what does next look like. Because being on staff with my husband was great, but him being like my boss as the lead pastor was not something we thought was a good fit for us. And so kind of did a lot of thinking and praying, and did a few different things, taught at a Lutheran high school, very part-time for a couple of years. Did some youth ministry kind of part-time at our church while they were in transition. And during that time, really started to find myself invited more and more into conversations about managing projects and big events and facilitating process and all that kind of stuff with a couple of really important mentors in my life. And so kind of made a shift about, gosh, maybe it's 8 years ago now. I guess it is 9 years ago, because I have an 8th grader. So at that point in time, really started to move into the world of process facilitation. Like, what does it look like to help people have the conversation that they need to have so that they can move towards the actions that they want to take? And so started at my own little company, I guess you call it. I am the one and only employee of such company. And so I do project management work with churches, with LCMS, with youth ministry, with districts, with different organizations that are local to me as well. And then I also work with congregations to help them get clarity about sort of the identity piece, like who are we really, what does that mean? And then what are we going to do with who we are? So that's me.
I feel like the piece about the vicar makes me really laugh because I mean it's like I think it's a term and a title that most people like. It's not a put down sort of thing, but like there are most certainly times when people are like, okay, vicar, like it's a very much it's just a very, so like when you say I'm not going to date the vicar, like there's I forget what the corner gas, right? So I've referenced this to Derek. There's I think it's a Canadian TV show that every time they reference this town that they don't like, they like turn and spit into the ground. And like it's sort of like oh, it's the vicar. And, you know, we all just kind of spit in the ground as like oh, he's just a vicar. He thinks he's all that important, all those sort of things. So you made me laugh and just remember the days of being the vicar. And that was my official title. So all those things, totally get that. So let's go here first for when we think about planning. I think most people especially in the church, have maybe two reactions when they come to like the phrase strategic planning. And maybe I'm even using the wrong phrase, so please correct me if I should use a different phrase. But when most people think about that phrase, they think either that's a business thing. Aren't we the church of Jesus? Like, why do we need to do this? That's not what we're here to do. Or because they've been involved in like a corporate world where they do this stuff, they're very jaded to it. Like oh man, I got to go through this thing. Like, this is awful. I've hated every single time, you know, we've had to do this. And so I'm just curious, like, how do you respond to those people? Like, hey, what if you've never thought we should do this as a church, why should we do it? And then if you've been jaded against it, like, here's why. Maybe be a little more hopeful and a little more optimistic about why this is good and important and actually productive for our organization.
Yeah. So a lot of times, one of the things that I will say first is that I have met very few church leaders, whether they're, you know, staff, pastors, principals, whatever, or just regular leaders. I've met very few who are active leaders at a church who need more to do. I mean, generally speaking, I don't need people who are like, you know what we really need to do at church? More stuff. We need more things to do. We're so bored, you know, whatever. Pretty rare that I meet that. What I usually meet is people that are like, we're just trying to do all the things because it's so much, because we have the best news ever. I mean, Jesus Christ, Son of God, came to save the world, and the world needs to know. And so we want to do all these things and find all these ways to make that known. And so my response to that is usually this. I don't think what we're talking about in strategic planning for churches, at least not the process that I would do, is about, hey, we need to plan some stuff so we can go do some stuff. Instead, it's to look at, here's all the things we're doing. And here's all the things we could do. Like, let's get clear about what we're trying to do so that we can move with intention towards that. And so some would say, kind of to push back on that, some would say, well, I mean, it's God's plan. If he wants it to happen, it's going to happen. Okay, well, I have a question. Would Lamb of God Lutheran Church and School exist if someone had not said, let us plant a church here, let us open a school there? Like, there's been intention all along the way. There's been people that have said, hey, let's do this thing. Now, they haven't done it just because they decided to do it. Like, there was clearly like God's spirit in at work through his people to further his word everywhere. But I would say one of the reasons that strategic planning from a why do it, biblically, would be, one, we need clarity about what we're doing. And for me, that becomes a stewardship issue. Financial stewardship, yes. But I really think in the economy, if you will, that we currently live in, economy is about attention right now. I mean, man, like what are you paying attention to? Where's our focus? What are we talking about? Like, even at church, what are the things we're talking about? What are the things we're spending our energy on, our people time, our hours, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think it's important for that reason to be a steward of the things God's given us financially and otherwise. So that would kind of be my response to the, is this even biblical side? I would also say, read the book of Numbers. God does seem to be a God of order. I mean, and if you haven't read it lately, there are more numbers in there. I'm rereading the whole, doing the whole Bible in a year thing. And man, there are a lot of numbers in that book. There's a lot of intention that God has to have. Now, I don't think that we have the kind of clarity that the Almighty God has to be able to say this is exactly what we should do with those kind of numbers. I'm not suggesting that, but I am saying that I don't think God is displeased with order, and he does call us pretty clearly in multiple places in Scripture to be stewards of that which we have. So that'd be my answer on the first side of it. When it comes to the other side, like the kind of business world side, my experience has been that most people who've done that in the business world, not all, but that most people are like, well, this is just what you do. But they get nervous about bringing that kind of work, that kind of push, that kind of mode into their church world. Because sometimes it feels like I don't want those two things. Like, I don't want this thing to mess up like this other thing. So sometimes there's like a discomfort that I've experienced with people in that. Even people that are working at big companies doing like big strategy work, and they think it's really great there, but they get nervous about bringing it over here. And I would say to you, those of you who might feel that way, we know who you are, or I know who you are as a church, and you're not some big, real estate company or something. You're a church. And so one of the things I love about doing strategic planning with churches is that I get to use tools and bring knowledge that's different than what you might do in your work world. And a few things that kind of come into play there. One of those is a phrase that I use often that sometimes people that really like strategic planning and want to bring it to church don't like, but that is life at the speed of church. I mean, things just take longer because Derek and Jared are here, like you're at church, 50 or in school, like 50 hours a week, I'm guessing, plus minus, but probably plus. And most people are only at church 1 to 3 hours a week. And if they're a school family, then more than that, but it's not as much. And so it just takes longer to do the things that you're doing. And so the speed at which that happens can be a little bit frustrating sometimes to folks, but it also can be comforting to say, we're not going to try to make that which we would do if we worked at, Lockheed Martin and did engineering kind of strategy work. We're not going to try to bring that to bear in the church because we're a different animal with a different calling. And just one more, and then I'll stop talking and let you guys talk a little bit. To your question, Pastor, about those that are like, ugh, I've done this in the real world and I kind of hate it. I mean, it's work, like that's for sure. But also it is work that is rooted, at least the process that we'll do, is rooted not just in planning, but the first work that we'll do, and actually the longer kind of length of work that we'll spend time on in our process is work rooted in who are we really? Like, who is Lamb of God? This group of people that God has put in this place, in this time, in 2026, for his purposes, and like having greater and greater sense of that and clarity about how we want to live or how you want to live with those people, then gives excitement, I think, and warmth and beauty to the, okay, where are we gonna head? So that would be my initial but long-winded answer to your question.
You said three things there that really stuck out. And I love the word that you use in this phrase too. You said clarity about what we are doing. And I think that's important too. Knowing not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it, right? And the purpose behind it is very important, because otherwise I like to describe it, as the Israelites out wandering in the desert. Right? They knew what they were doing and where they were supposed to go, but it took them a while for various reasons. But I like to think about it that way. If we don't have direction, then we're just out in the wilderness, right? We can still accomplish ministry and the mission, but we might not be living up to our potential with that without the clarity. The other one too is the life at the speed of church, and this is very true in my role. When I'm meeting with vendors, whether it be curriculum, whether it be whatever, just gathering information, they're always like, so when can you make a decision on this? And I'm like, well, I got to wait for the budget to pass. And then I can maybe make a decision. And they're like, when's the budget pass? Not until June. So yeah, it's always fun. And then they're like, oh, you have to get like board approval and like all this other stuff. It's like, oh yes.
This is a good deal.
Yeah, it's always fun. And then the third one that you said is it's finding out who we are, right? And I think that's really important too, that it's really kind of an accreditation of who we are as a church, as a congregation. And I use that word very deliberately, right? That when we talk about accreditation on the school side, it is an audit of who we are. And so I see it kind of as like an accreditation of who we are as a congregation.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say, I think with the process that, well, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more, but there's kind of two phases to it that we'll do. In this first phase, I call it the vision frame, or we call it the vision frame. And it's really about like discovery and clarity about who we are, like for a long term, like not for the next 5 years, this is who we are, and then we're going to revisit and change it. But like, no, like this is like before Pastor came, before Derek came, and after they're gone. This stuff lasts. Now the plans, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 3 years from now, those need to be done every year, 3 years, etc. But some of this who we are stuff just has a lot, like it's just longer years, like longer time.
And it was this week when someone was in my office and I was inviting them to be a part of this. And I was trying to explain to them sort of hey, here's the big picture stuff. And I used some of that language of like, these are things that are and will persist for like 30 years. And they just looked at me and said, so like when you're still here in 30 years, I was like, well, I mean, I guess I'm 33. So 30 years from now, I'd be like 63. So like, I guess I could be here in 30 years and then we could revisit the mission, vision, values. But that's sort of like, it's not timeless, but it's
Right.
it's the long enduring, not fastly changed. I mean, all those sort of words that are so valuable because again, as people, I'm the pastor, people come to me and have all sorts of ideas, right? Hey, we should do this. Hey, we should do that. And unless there's a clear purpose, mission, vision, values, stuff like that, it sort of feels like it's well, what do I want to do, or what do we want to do, or like it kind of becomes what's pastor going to say yes to and what's pastor going to say no to, or who can yell the loudest when it's time to decide what we're going to do, because then they'll get their way, what they want. And I tell people, hey, like that's fine. It's not, I wouldn't necessarily say it's wrong or bad. It's just not a unifying moving forward as a family, as a church, because then it becomes what Sally and Bill want and not what Gina and Freddie want, or that sort of thing. So before we talk about like the actual process as far as like what we'll do, I think this is another helpful distinction, and you said it so well before when we've been talking. The difference between being a facilitator and a consultant, because I think especially in church world, again, people have a very particular image of strategic planning, and that would be of more of a you come in and tell me what to do sort of thing. So I'm gonna let you talk about it though. Yeah, you're the expert here, so go ahead, give us a distinction between the two. And I mean, and maybe too, it's not that one is bad per se, but they're for different purposes and reasons. So what's the difference, and why might we want one versus the other?
Yeah. So, in my way of thinking, consultant is generally someone who says, I'm an expert about these things. And so I'm going to come in, I'm going to, visit, I'm going to see the place, I'm going to meet people, I'm going to do interviews, all these things. And then based on my expertise, I'm going to tell you what I think you should do. Right. And so, so then what happens is that person comes in, here's my recommendations based on what you've done. Here's how you can implement them. They may offer some support pre or post on that, and then they're kind of out of there. I will say that the research essentially says that when that happens, like if I were to walk in and say, here's what I think you should do, and hand you a list of like, here's my recommendations based on what I know, that generally speaking, if they're my recommendations to you, you as a church, or really, this is like cross organizationally, so businesses, whatever, that you are most likely going to implement about 20% of my recommendations. Okay. Now, if I come in, that's okay. That 20% is better than nothing, right? So you're doing 20%. Great. Now, if I come in and we have some conversation, we work through a process, you determine what you think you should do. And then, so that I'm kind of facilitating that process, but you determine it. When I leave, the information out there says you will implement, because it was your idea, not mine, 80% of what we decide on.
That's huge.
So it's huge. It is huge. Now, mind you, it might be that I'm sitting there biting my lip thinking they really should do this. This is what they should totally do. And honestly, like, I will be totally honest with you. There are times in a room when I'm facilitating and I'm like, oh my gosh, if they would only do this one thing, it would be so much better. Sometimes I'm biting my lip to not say that thing. Other times I might say, hey, I might offer, hey, this is something I'm thinking about. What do you think? But this is like way into the work. And sometimes they're like, and they move on. And I'm thinking, if they just did that, it'd be so great. Well, here's the deal. This is your church where God has called you to be a community of people. It's not my church. Now, it's my church in the sense that we're the capital C church altogether. But this is not my church. This is your church where God has called you. And so my role then is to come in and help you have those conversations. And so my expertise is not around what should you do as a church, what should you do as a school, preschool, etc. What should you do with your real estate? That's not my expertise. My expertise is around process. So what I'm good at is here's the process to have the conversations to get you from A to B. And A to B is who are we and what do we want to do about that? And so, so that's kind of I try to make that distinction really clear, because there are times, most of the time, if I'm honest, where I come into a church or a church and school, and there's at least one or two people on the vision team that really want me to come in and tell them how it is. Like, give us the silver bullet, then we'll do that thing, and then it's going to fix everything, and then whatever. Well, here's the flip side of that as a facilitator consultant type person is then that's so that then when I leave and the thing you tried doesn't work, you can blame me for why it didn't work. When the reality is, as a good friend and coach of mine has said to me before, well, Leah, at some point, you're going to have to put on your superwoman cape and fly away. So me flying in to try to be superwoman to tell you what to do and fix your problems isn't going to help you when I'm gone, because I'm not there all the time. And also God has called you to be in this place and to know the people, to know your neighbors and your community, to know the kids in the school, to know one another and care for one another, and to make decisions about ministry. So my process or my style really is to come in and like, here's the conversations we're going to have, and I'll make you work through some harder conversations you don't want to have. We'll also have some fun. But that's the process. So versus here's what you do, go do it, and I'm out. Instead, it's what do you want to do? Let me help you figure that out and have the conversations needed.
I think as people hear that, it makes sense. Like now, as you've explained that, I think people say, oh, duh, like that makes sense. But I also believe the opposite would be true, that if you were to sort of poll people beforehand, I can almost hear someone in my head saying, well, then what do you need them for? If they're not going to come in and tell you what to do, what good are they? You know, like, it's not, maybe that's saying it in too harsh of a tone, but sort of in certain situations where we're looking for help and looking for answers, we want people to just tell us it's why ChatGPT and all these AI programs amaze people, because you can just type it in and it spits it right out, right? It doesn't ask you more questions. It's why people sometimes get frustrated with me, because what do you think about this, Pastor? Well, this weekend in Easter worship, I told them I usually ask the question, why do you want to know? And, it's more asking questions than giving answers. And at times it's not what people want. But as you said, eventually it's more effective at what they not necessarily need, but it's more effective at change and ownership and being bought into the things that are getting done and being done in a way that I think is, I mean, it's biblical, right? You are the royal priesthood. You are the people who once were in darkness and now are not, and are sent out into the world to proclaim the excellencies of him who's called you out of darkness into his marvelous. I mean, it's all right there. And so I think it's one of those, it would be very easy for us to just overlook this and say, okay, yeah, she's right. That makes sense. Let's move on. But I just want to poke it a little bit more before we go any further.
Well, and I would say too, it's like, this is kind of how I see the difference between like consulting and facilitating. Kind of two schools of thoughts here. The consulting is often, at least in my mind, kind of like the get rich quick scheme. Somebody's telling you what to invest in and you do it. And then, like you said, 20% of the time, it might work. And then 80% of the time it might not work. Whereas the facilitator side is a more like the slow, steady, methodical, like we're doing this for the longevity, for the long term, rather than just a quick fix. And I don't remember what my other thought was. I've been here since 6 a.m. this morning, so it'll come back to me. And then
I would add to what you said about the expert pieces, like even within processes I do with churches, sometimes we say, I think we need, or they decide, I think we need to bring in somebody who does X. So I think we need a marketing expert, like get a marketing consultant to do that work. That's what they do. Get someone who does, school enrollment or whatever it is, like whatever the piece is, like get the person, like we need experts, right? And so that's an important thing. I also wanted to comment, Jared, you made a comment about like AI and ChatGPT and all the things. I am very well aware that you all could just bust out some ChatGPT and literally in about a minute, you could have yourself a mission statement, a strategic plan, value statements, all of it, strategies. You can so do that, like totally. The problem is the power is not in the product, it's in the process. I mean, there is importance to the product. Okay, so I don't mean to say that it doesn't matter what we get at the end, because it does matter. But the power is having a product at the end where there was a hard-fought process to get there that says, yeah, this really is what we're about. Like, this is really who we are. And then the people that have been in the room to help build that, develop that, when somebody says, I don't understand, like, why do you have this value of, whatever, friendliness or something? Why does that rise to the level of a value for us? Well, and you say, well, here's something we really talked about who we are as a church or what our neighborhood needs or whatever. And you get to lean into that and it means something. It's not just words on a page.
And so a little backstory here to how we ended up having conversations with Leah, why she's coming. One of the things that I saw when I got here was the need for something like this, right? So I got here, and we have our statement, through Christ we learn, live, and love. And one of the first things I felt like I needed to decide was if I was going to come in and axe this thing or stick with it. And someone I was talking to this week said, I was really surprised you just didn't come in and get rid of that right away. Like, I think people expected you to just do away with it. And I told this person, well, there's a few reasons why I wouldn't have done that. One was I've never been anywhere where everyone knew their statement. And so it's like this, it's very unique to me, at least, where
No, it's
people
it's a
can,
very unique thing.
right.
Yeah.
And so it's like I don't want to kill something that people are knowing and it's there on the front of their mind. And then also just the trust that requires, I think, to say, hey, you know, this thing you've been saying for years. Hi, I'm the new guy. Goodbye. Like it's not the way that I want to lead. And I hope it's not the way that people see me leading in that. And so, sure, is it probably going to take, did we, quote unquote, if we, big if, right? If that does change or go away, that, well, then that does that mean we just wasted a whole year of saying this? Sure, but it's the speed of the church, like we've said, right? And it's an important thing that we did. So part of the how we got here was I was trying to read the book they gave us at the seminary was Holy Conversations, and the whole point of the book is that it's not necessarily the pastor's job or the end goal, kind of like you've already said, Leah, but that it's because these are the baptized, beloved people of God, that when they come together and have conversations about identity and purpose, that these aren't just business things, they're actually holy conversations where God is at work. And so I was reading this and trying to like lead our board through some of it. And I just realized through conversations with one of our district people, I'm not that person. Like I'm not gifted at that. And so it's hey, I know we need this and I can't do it. And I think we need to find someone to do it. It's sort of, and so in some ways,
Can I add something?
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's good.
I was just going to say, not just whether or not it's your giftedness, but there is a ton of wisdom in having an outside person have that conversation with you, because especially as a pastor, you've got a couple things going on. People are like, well, we don't want pastor to feel bad, or he knows this theology better than us. So what if I say the wrong thing? Right. And so whether it's like the principal or just a board leader, whatever, the person leading the conversation cannot help. Either they drive the process, because it can go in two ways. They drive the process and it becomes what they want it to be because everyone wants to please them and be done. So that's one option. Or that person who's facilitating doesn't really get to have a voice in the product because their job is to facilitate the conversation. And so bringing in someone else to facilitate, like, let's have the conversation so that pastor can really think and say what he's thinking, and Derek can really think about what he's thinking, and board leader Betty over here can really say what she's thinking, and I can, or the facilitator who's good at facilitating, can say, hey, Betty, you've been really quiet and I haven't heard anything. Or can say, Pastor, I'm going to have you answer last, because I want to make sure that everybody feels like they get to say their thing and their thing has value, instead of them checking, like being afraid that they're going to say something theologically wrong, or it's not going to come out right, or it's going to hurt your feelings because they say, actually, Pastor, we think that this new program that you started when you got here is not working. They don't want to say that to you because they love you, but they might say it if I give them permission and help kind of work us through the process. So bringing somebody from the outside, I think, is sometimes not just saying, I'm not good at this. It's saying, I need someone to like pull this conversation out so that I can participate in it as the pastor, and so that they can all speak their mind.
Yeah, I was just going to say too that, Jared and I, we can walk into a room and we can say, all right, guys, we're going to talk about this today. And everybody can be like, oh, okay. Right. Like, depending on whatever topic it is, and bringing out some of those more challenging conversations, I think is harder for one of us to do, just because of our roles and how often we interact with the people in here, versus you coming in and saying, all right, guys, guess what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about Lenten dinners or whatever, and XYZ, whatever it is, a hard conversation. I think the response is very different, and people's take on it is very different, and that they're more willing to share, like you just said, things that they might not otherwise say. And those things need to be said, because, it's not, this whole process and this whole thing, like our organization is not, Derek and Jared are thinking about where we want to go in the future, so we're going to make decisions off of that. It's, no, we need to make these decisions. It's not the Derek and Jared show, it's the Lamb of God show. and that's what it has to be. So yeah, well, we might be in the positions to lead us to those things and through some of the challenges and hurdles that come with that. Like, it's really our plan and our role together to figure that out. So I think that's very important to where one of us is not in that seat, that it's very helpful for the others that are part of the process.
And I think we've talked a little bit about this, Leah, and it's not I am not casting shame or anything like that. But in Lamb of God's history too, there was a pastor who came in and sort of did the bulldoze kind of thing, at least from what I have heard and been told. And so, taking that into mind, knowing all of those things, it's also hey, I need to, it's not remove myself from the process, but I need to do every single thing I can to not pilot, sort of wash my hands, right? Because I care and I think and I hope that people see that I do care about this place deeply, but that this is not all right, I've had secret meetings with Leah and we're working together behind the scenes and she's going to ask all the right questions to get exactly what I want. Like, that is not at all what's happening. That's not at all what the goal is. And it's quite the opposite, right? So I've told people here too, like, we're always a we, and this is the same thing, right? We're still a we in planning together. It's not a make pastor happy, like you said, Leah. It's not a what does Derek or Jared want. It's a, hey, what are we going to do together? And what are we going to do that, Lord willing, sure, I'm here until I'm 65 and retire, but if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what are you going to keep doing? Because this is who you are and what you're here to do. And I think whether I'm buying too much into those things, some people might say that, but to me, it feels so energizing to just dream of a day when we can say those things and know those things and say, hey, this is who we are. And there's sort of the looking around the collective, yeah, that is us. And we know this is who we are. And so now we can go, well, should we, I don't know, should we start having campfires at our entrance of our property every Friday night? Well, no, it's not about who we are. Or should we start having ballerina dances on Sunday morning? Well, no, sorry, that's not who we are. And there's at least for me, there's great hope. There's great inspiration, maybe might be another word. Like, it's an empowering thing to sort of have that idea of this is who we are. This is what we're here to do. And how does that help us into the future? So anything about that? And then I think we should dive into the process.
Sure. Just quickly, one thing about that. One of the other beautiful things about having an outsider like me come in and do this is that, you do have a different perspective as pastor. Like, you have a calling to lead this place. You're the shepherd. This is your calling. And so I can, within those conversations, be like, all right, pastor, you do sit in a different seat. It's not like an above seat from the we. It's not a below seat from the we. It's just a different seat with a different perspective. And you spend 50 some hours a week on campus, I'm guessing. And Derek, you have a different perspective. These families differently. Different people in the room that you guys will gather to be a part of this process, they'll see things differently. And so being able to have those perspectives and let those speak into the process, but not, so it's not it is a we, a flat we, but also there's just different roles within that. They're going to speak differently in different moments.
It's the body of Christ, right? And another, the arm is not the arm, the head is not the head. It's we need each other in all the different parts and pieces, and that's what makes we powerful.
And that also, I think, the process you're talking about also, you use the if I get hit by a bus, things change. Stuff happens that none of us expect. And so if this is who this church is, it should be this is who this church is just while Derek's the principal. And then it's going to shift, right? No, this is more of an ongoing sense of who we are as we kind of move forward as a church.
Cool. So let's go ahead and dive into the process. And so we are putting together our team of 12. I've got 8 yeses so far, and I'm praying fervently for my last 4 that are still deliberating. But of those 12 people, what are they going to be doing, Leah? What are the things that they're going to be sort of talking about? Walk a person who won't necessarily be in the room kind of through the general process of what it is and what it's like, so that then they can say, oh, I can see how that's going to be helpful. I can see
Yeah.
that's going to be beneficial.
Sure. So first of all, I'll say there's kind of two main phases to the work we're going to do. And the first phase is actually the longer phase, and it is what we'll call vision frame. And that's kind of the who are we, the identity kind of work. And so a vision frame, and I use that phrase kind of intentionally, it's sort of connected to a larger process, a church kind of a process that is by this group called Oxano that I've got some training in that I do some work with. Anyway, the frame has four sides. That's why it's a frame. And there's kind of four pieces to that. So it's like answering kind of the four, what I'd say are the four fundamental questions of an organization, or in this case, in a church and school. And so the first question is, what are we doing? Like, what is it that we're doing? And that would be the answer to mission. Now, some people might say, well, hello, isn't that obvious? We are doing the Great Commission. Yes, you are. My question is, what are you seeking to achieve? Like, what are you doing towards it? A lot of places, churches and also other ministries are working towards the Great Commission. What are you doing? Okay, so what's your mission statement? So we'll work on that. And again, it could be that you're, I'm going to say it wrong. I want to say live, laugh, love, but that's not it. It's learn, live, and love. Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay. Sorry. Please forgive
No,
me.
you're
It's
good.
alphabetical. Just remember,
right.
it's alphabetical. Learn,
Okay.
live,
I was
love.
waiting for you to
Okay,
say
that's
that,
good.
Derek, because that's how I remember it still. The first week I was here, I think I messed it up, and he goes, just remember, it's alphabetical. And I don't know if I've got it right every time since, but it's been pretty close.
Closely. Okay. Learn, live, love. Okay. So it could be, just to be really clear, that mission statement stays. Or it could be that it ends up someplace else. So what are we doing? That's the first question. The second question is, why are we doing it? So why do we do the things that we do? And so that would be, when we answer that question, we're going to work on values. So what are the things that are why we do what we do? And if you can picture in your head, because I know a lot of you are watching this or listening to this in a podcast, as you picture kind of a square, I want you to imagine that the mission is kind of on the right-hand square side and values is on the left hand. And I want you to imagine like an arrow that goes from the values across to the mission. The reason I want you to imagine an arrow is that if your arrow is kind of like, you think about the tip of the arrow where the mission is, like this is where we're going and what we're doing. Any arrow that is doing its job well is going to have those little feather things on the back that are called the fletching. If you don't have those, they go all over the place. Okay, so shoot an arrow without any feathers on it and it just kind of goes, you can't really predict where it's going to go. So those feathers, those values can help us, they kind of keep us level, they keep us headed where we want to be. Why does Lamb of God do the things that Lamb of God does? So my church here in Denver area, in Littleton, actually Centennial, is called Our Father Lutheran Church. And we have a different set of values, and we'll have a different mission statement than what you guys have, but those values point to and paint some of the picture of who we are. Now, not to get too far in the weeds, but as we do those values, most of those values, at least 2/3 will be the rule that I will give the group, need to be actual values. Yes, this is what we value. We value these things. And it could be that, let's say there's 6 values that you end up with. It could be that 2 of them are a little more aspirational. We're not this yet, but we're leaning towards it. Okay. And so it's actual and aspirational, but this is the why question. So what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And then the last 2 questions are, how are we doing this? How are we living out this mission? And what I mean by how is not like, here's the 15 different small groups or the different ministries and all the kind of the listing of things that are happening in your church, but rather, what are those primary processes that we want every disciple, every member, every learner in our church at Lamb of God to be connected to engage and be growing in their faith. So that's the how question. What are our key strategies that we use to live out that mission? Then the last one is when, which is a little bit weirder of a question. And the question is not just when are we going to do it, but when do we know we're successful? And I want to be really clear about that last one. It's a little different than business world sort of metrics, although we'll look at that a little bit on the strategic planning side of this after we do the vision frame. But it really is discipleship outcomes. If Lamb of God is living out their mission with their values and doing the strategies, what does it look like in the life of Derek, or in the life of Jared's kids, or in the life of Betty, who's been a member for the last 30 some years? What does it look like in their life? What are the outcomes would be the word that we'll use there? if they are living out that mission. So what's the win? Kind of the picture there is kind of a bullseye picture. What does that look like? And so that vision frame, rather than a simple mission statement, really looks to answer all 4 of those questions with 4 different pieces, right? So mission, values, strategies, and outcomes. And part of the reason for that is because a lot of times what we see in churches and also in other nonprofits, whether they're Christian or not, organizations, is that we try to shove everything into the mission statement. And then guess what? No one knows your mission statement. One of the reasons they know yours is because it's short and it's memorable and it's some alliteration. That's why people know it. And so if we try to shove everything into that mission statement, it can kind of lose some of its power. And this lets us really answer all 4 questions, but without losing some of that power. So that's the first kind of set of work. And it's a lot of work. Like that will take us through August to do that work at minimum. And so the way we'll do that work is we'll work on those 4 pieces. Before we even do that, we'll spend some time looking at, we're going to do a congregational survey that'll kind of give you a chance to speak in. It's not a customer satisfaction survey. So it's not, I like this and I don't like that. Rather, it's looking to have you speak into kind of 3 areas. Who are we? Like the people that God's gathered in this place at this time. Like, who are we? What do we like? What's our neighborhood or our community like? So what's our place? So kind of looking through that, because you all live in that place or around that place. And then the last one would be kind of what I call passions. Like, what do we care about? So who are the people, what's the place, and what are our passions? And so there'll be a few other questions in there as well. We'll do a survey so we can hear from the congregation on that. And then the vision team will spend some time really looking at those 3 components and distill that down. Look at what are some of the challenges that we face, what are some of the constraining factors, all that kind of stuff. And then say, okay, so at our core, like what is kind of us? Like what kind of makes us us? And we'll put that piece together. And then after we complete that piece, that becomes sort of the like the blueprint, if you will, like a foundational piece for building the frame on. So we don't just start with like, boom, let's come up with the mission statement. We're doing some work around like, who are we, where are we, et cetera. And then as we get that piece really clear, which is a whole session in and of itself. And when I say session, that's like a day and a half, like an evening and a day. We'll spend some time on that stuff, get that stuff really clear, because words do matter. Words are important. I made the comment about ChatGPT can spit out all the words you want. It sure can. But we also want to use words that really say what you mean. And so that's the first kind of part of it. So before I shift into the second part, what are you guys thinking about or wondering about on the vision frame side?
Oh, sorry. You look like you're about to say something.
I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, it's one of those things where I'm very curious to see and hear how it will go, because I sometimes struggle with the getting to an end sort of thing. And so I can go on, Mission Insight and pull all of the reports for a 10-15 minute commute. I can scroll through there and look at, people here really say that the sermon is the most important thing they're looking for. Okay, they don't care about this thing. And I'm really good at gathering all of that stuff. But if you were to ask me, okay, Pastor, now what am I supposed to do with that? I don't know, like just preach a good sermon. That's where like we're different people with different skills, abilities. And so I'm excited to just be alongside other people who will be able to say, well, like, hey, I think this is what that means, or, this is how this is going to help us. And so again, those sort of things are what I'm excited to kind of see the end goal or end, I don't know if product is the right word or not, but the end product of what comes out of those conversations, because it's just exciting, very exciting. So yeah, let's go ahead and go into the next part.
So that's vision frame piece. So the product, if you will, that comes out of that is basically a 1-pager that says those 4 pieces that we just talked about. So then the next phase, the next part of it is what we'll call the vision plan. So if you're used to strategic planning language, this is like your plan, right? Like this is your strategic plan that says, hey, where are we going? So if you want to think in terms of the questions again, so we did what, why, how, and when. So this is kind of the where. This is where do we imagine that God is taking us in the next X years? I don't know if we've actually settled yet on how many years that is. It's different in different churches. Sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes it's 10 years, sometimes it's 7 years. And so we kind of set like a horizon that's kind of out there. And I want you to think as you imagine a strategic plan like this. Again, this is church world. This is a little different. And there are one of the beautiful things about church world is that it functions within the business world, if you're a businessy person, a church, the business or the organization of a church functions more like a family-owned business. So if you know anything about family-owned businesses, there's some real complications in that. Like you've got people that have like multiple hats that they're wearing, and that's us as a church, right? Like sometimes I will say, although it can come up as crass, that it's complicated that at church, our customers, if you will, and our employees are the same people. So the people that are here, like benefiting from the discipleship ministries and the preaching and the word and all that stuff, are the same people that are living the mission and taking the mission out. And so there's some complications in that. And so because of that, and because the majority of the church is only there for a couple of 3 hours a week, potentially, because of that, the kind of strategic plan that I'm talking about is essentially a one-page strategic plan. Now, there will be some accompanying things that would come along with it that kind of tease all that out. But if you want to imagine four lines, so a long-term vision at the top, kind of in a box that says, this is where we think we're headed 10 years from now. Again, this is not trying to forecast what God has in mind, because we don't know, right? Like who saw COVID coming? Not me. We didn't see that. But instead, this is to say, imagining who we are, knowing who we are, what do we see as possible? Like what's our great dream for 10 years from now? And we'll do some really specific work around that. There's kind of some templates, if you will, that I will kind of say, here's different directions that a church can go. And we'll kind of look through those and talk about what that might look like and what that mean for you. So that'd be kind of the long-term vision. So let's say 5 to 10 years. And then we will, underneath that, we'll say, okay, so over the next 3 years, what are 4 big strategies that are going to help us realize that goal? So not stuff that's going to happen tomorrow, but stuff that's going to take some time. So 3-year strategies. And then we'll also focus down, then get a little bit closer to like where you are now and say, like, what's our 1-year focus or 1-year vision? So let's say for you all, that work might be the 27, 28 year. Let's say that's our 1-year vision. And then we'll do some 90-day initiatives that help lead towards that. Now, some of you are thinking, that's it? There's only like 4 and 4 is 8. Okay, so only 10 things on there. Yes, there's only 10 things on there, but they're big things. There are big things that are meant to make time, and that they're the kind of things we want everybody to be able to see. And so I can see one piece of paper and be a part of that process and say, how do I fit in here? What are we doing? Where are we headed? And I can see all of those different kind of horizon lines at once. Whereas if you hand me a binder or a giant folder, I'm likely ignoring it. And so there will be people who are championing those various pieces, but yeah. What were you gonna say, Derek?
I just said it's gonna sit on the desk and not be opened.
Yeah. But that one pager, man, you can like print it and put it on the wall, which I will literally suggest that you spend a lot of time doing, so people can say, this is what we're doing, this is where we're headed, which is a huge piece. So that's kind of it. I know that maybe that sounds super complicated, maybe it sounds super simplistic, but really is meant to say, how can we all get on the same page? So we're all moving in the same direction. So know who we are, know what we're doing. So kind of back to my earlier comment to your question of why should we do this? You don't need more to do, but you do need greater clarity about where you're spending your resources of energy and time and attention, so that you're moving in the same direction and not pulling in different directions. And usually in churches, it's pretty rare. It does happen. But most of the time, it's not that we are intentionally pulling against each other. We're just not going in the same direction. And so what happens is we get stuck. We just don't move because people are pulling in the same direction or in opposite directions and staying in one spot.
I do have one question about just kind of the whole process in general. What are some of the challenges, road bumps, whatever you want to say, things that often blindside congregations when they're going through this process? Is there anything that we should be aware of as we go into this process?
That's such a great question. I don't know if that's a blindsiding piece, but I'll say a couple things. One, every church I've ever worked with, one side of that frame tends to be a challenge and we get kind of hung up. And it's not the same side. Like I can think of every congregation I've worked with, and it's not a different side for everyone, but it generally is. There's something I'm like, why are we stuck on this? That seems so obvious. So just know, like, it's a process. And if we're doing process well, it means we're talking. And so you're going to be like, she said we were going to finish vision or finish values by the end of this meeting, and they are not done. Okay, they are not done. But we would rather have it be right and be at ease and at peace with it then have it be fast. So that'd be one piece. We'll probably get stuck someplace in there and have to do some work. So that's one. Another piece, and this does actually connect to the process. I don't think I mentioned this part yet, but this is your whole church, not just 12 people that are going to be looking to live out this vision frame. And so because of that, this is not 12 people decided. No, everybody just like check the box. One of the things that happens sometimes that maybe not blindsides, but kind of gets people kind of like nervous is we get into the middle of the process and people start asking folks on the vision team, like, so like, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm not sure. Like, is it done? Is it not done? What do we say? What do we not say? And so kind of working through, like, I want to make sure that I like really speak for myself, but also like honor those that have shared their opinions with me, etc. And so we'll do generally after we have 2 sides of the frame done. Sometimes it's after 3 sides, but usually after 2 sides of the frame. So mission and values, sometimes also strategy. We'll do what we call like a wet cement feedback session, where theoretically I would come in. If I'm not there because of timing or whatever, then we'll set up a meeting where the vision team will kind of say, hey, here's where we're at. So we have so far. And it's not a free for all of like, here's what everybody thinks. And we're all just like going crazy in the room. But instead it's to say, hey, like, let's just look at mission. Tell us, what do you like? How do you understand that? Like, what do you see there? What do you like about it? And is there anything that would keep you from being on board with it? And so we'll kind of work through that. So we get that input, and then that input goes back to the vision team. And then the vision team takes that into account and might make some shifts, might make some turns. I've also worked with congregations where they had an intentional, like a advisory team, basically, that was like connecting in between meetings, and just given, you know, a couple of the key leaders, like the pastor and maybe the operations director or whatever, like some feedback on what they saw. And that's been helpful as well for different churches. So the pitfall or the blind side might be like, oh, like we finished and then people go, oh, are we actually going to change that? So I had this one pastor, bless his heart. He was so great. Loved this guy. And we spent like a day, like well over a day, writing a new mission statement. And then we literally like 30 minutes before we're ending. And he goes, so are we actually talking about changing the mission statement here? And I was like, where have you been, sir? Like, this we've been doing for an entire day. But it wasn't because he's not intelligent. It was because that there's like this fear of like that feels like a big deal. I mean, because there is a responsibility in that, that the whole congregation shares. And you're basically saying, as the congregation, we trust these people to really have the hard conversation, because we can't have 50 or 100 or 200 people in the room and really be fruitful in conversation. So we're going to entrust these people with this work. They're going to bring it to us. Oftentimes that will also, if you have elders or you have different groups, that sometimes we'll go to different groups just to give a little bit of feedback along the way, and then goes to larger congregation. But there is a little bit of like, oh, are we really doing this now? That can sometimes creep up on people as they get to it. Because it does feel scary to say like, yeah, this is the thing. And I would say 2 things. One, yes, you are committing to this thing. And if you don't commit to it, you've kind of wasted a lot of time, for one. And not only that, but like, give it a shot. And now there'll be times, like my congregation went through this process, not with me, but with a different facilitator about 10 years ago. And they're just now, like about a month ago, met with a different facilitator. It kind of just took another loop back through and said, hey, there's a little bit of language we're going to change on this one part of the frame. It's like one piece and one value or something. Sometimes you go, yeah, I think we got that wrong. Let's change that piece up. That's okay. Like, it's okay to do that. But at some point you have to say, we're going to decide and commit on this, and we're going to live with it for a while before we do that. And that can feel scary, because you might have one person who doesn't like it. Like, this one person doesn't like this word. And the vision team literally spent 45 minutes debating, should it be this word or that word? And then you have to be able to say, we landed on this word. This is why. This is the back and forth. And usually the person will be like, okay. Or they won't, and then you have to move on. So that's another option.
I will do my best to not wait until 30 minutes left in one of those sessions and be like, wait, are we actually doing this? I will try very, very hard not to do that. That's my sense of humor. So we'll get to know each other more in this process for sure.
So I think as sort of a last question or a bring us home thing, let's imagine someone is still skeptical. I don't know. Maybe unnecessarily, I always default to like people are skeptical or suspect or are slow to come around to something that's as big as this, as important as this, for lots of reasons. But those old phrases, right? Like, you're changing my church, does that mean things aren't going to be how I like them? I mean, it's all those, we all have preferences, and myself included. And so if someone is listening still, I mean, they made it this far, and maybe they're still trying to find a reason or a way to think like, hey, this is still good. Like, how would you say to someone, hey, this is how we know your church is ready for this. This is how you're ready to engage in this kind of conversation. Because again, I mean, I don't think it's too far to say, well, you'll never perfectly be ready. It's kind of I mean, I don't know too many people who said, yeah, I'm most certainly ready to be a parent because I know everything there is to know about being a parent. And so I've decided I'm going to be a parent. Like, that is never the case. Even
And if they did, they were wrong.
Yeah, right.
They learned that very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone like that who's, still wants to come along and is just really, I don't know if we're ready. Like, I mean, this pastor's only been here for a year. Like, how do we know? Just there's a lot there. So what would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say two things. Remember I mentioned the two phases of work, right? The identity work and then the plan work. So the frame and the plan. We have set dates, and you guys can attest this. We've set dates for all of our meetings to the vision frame. We have not yet set the dates for the vision plan. And there's a couple reasons for that, but a primary one for me is I want to see where we are, because sometimes it makes a lot of sense to say we need a little more time to live with this who we are part before we start making a plan. I would say your pastor, from what I've seen, and I've listened to the podcast a couple times just to kind of get a sense for you all, that you've spent a lot of time listening. I've seen some of the work that you guys have done, surveys and different things like that. So there's been a lot of time spent listening. And now I think after being there a little over a year is a time to say, let's get clearer about who we are, so that, and we're ready to move forward, we can. And it could be that we do that vision plan piece is like 2 months after we finish the frame. That could be. It could be that the vision team says, I think we need 6 months before we're coming back to this. That's okay too. It is my desire to see this be successful for the church, not to speed it along for my purposes or your calendar. So that's one thing I would say. We're not going to rush those pieces that we don't need to rush. The other thing that I would say to someone who says, I'm just not sure we're ready. I mean, on the one hand, you are never going to know for sure if you're ready. So there is a little bit of that, but it does not, I mean, I said I'm not a consultant. My expertise is in process. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of rooms with a lot of church leaders, and I have seen people go through this process often. And generally speaking, I think you're in a good spot in large part because you have strong communication happening between your pastor and your principal. So that tells me a lot. The fact that they're aligned. I had got to meet some of the board of directors on a Zoom call. And it was a lot of listening. They probably listened to me talk more than we all got to go back and forth a little bit. But even that, the fact that there's some trust there seems to me to be indicator that you're ready. Now, why should we do this? Should we not do it? I'm going to say this about that. You're going to do something. You're going to do some things. You are doing things. The question is, do you want to choose the direction based on who we think we are and what we see God calling us to, or you want it just to happen to you? Because either can happen. Things are going to happen. Your community is changing around you. I see my community here in Littleton shifting and changing. Some of those changes I like, a lot of them I don't like. I don't choose whether or not that's happening. I choose how I'm going to respond. So full disclosure, when you asked me to do this, I went back and was looking at your podcast stuff, and I saw that in January you had done a podcast on like planning kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm listening to this. I want to know what these people think before I get on board with this. And Derek, you said something that I have probably repeated 10 times to different people. So yeah, I quoted you. Jared asked you, right? You're the winner.
It's really funny because Jared and I were just having a conversation the other day about like planning and stuff. And I said, it's okay. Derek, nobody listens to Derek anyways. So that just made
Well,
my
I
day. Thank
did.
you.
So how about that? Pastor asked you something like where do you fall on the continuum of like hardcore, like planner down to the detail, and like I'm way over here. And before you even answer that question, you said in terms of like God stuff, like why would you plan? And you said, make the field ready for rain.
Mm.
And I thought that was so beautiful. I was a farm kid, PS, so that's maybe part of that.
Nebraska kid. So
But
yeah.
wow, right? Okay, so like we want to be intentional to say, how can we do things to be ready? But you're not going to make it rain. Like you're not going to make people drive into your parking lot. Like you're not going to make that happen. Like you do not have that much control over people. But you can prepare the field for rain for what God is going to do. And so I think to say where do we think we're going? Where do we see God taking us? Like let's imagine our faithfulness and his provision. Like where do we think 10 years from now could be? How do we prepare that field for what could be? Just like the people who said, I think we should have a school, the Lamb of God, I think we should do it. They didn't see today when they did that, but they're like, I think we should do it. So they did all these different things to move towards that. They're like, we should find a piece of land. We need to hire a principal. We need to think about, like all those things. You do that and kind of open-handed the whole way saying, well, where's this going to take us? But we're going to make choices. So if you're saying, I'm not sure about this whole planning thing, you can just let the winds drive you because the change is going to happen. It's going to. The question is, do you want to say, here's where we want to go, rather than just make it happen to you? Because lots of things change in church world. People change, places change, leaders change, programs change. That's just happens. And so let's be intentional. Let's steward those things that we have intentionally.
That's awesome. Is there any other question you got, Derek, before we sort of close her off here?
Not any for right now. I'm looking forward to the process. I told Jared that that I had come across some of the stuff that you have done through some of my other contacts, and that I've kind of had this on my radar for a while too. So I'm excited to get going with it and to work with you in that.
And I can say truly, I actually said to somebody earlier today, I was having pastor with our executive pastor, otherwise known as my husband's colleague. We had coffee this morning, and he was like, what are you looking forward to? And I said, I'm really excited about this church in Las Vegas. Like there's just something about the earnestness, I think is the word I will use, that I hear the two of you use in your conversations, the way you ask, even like when you first called and said, hey, I want to interview you. The questions that you asked, the things that seem important to you, the way you talk about your people, like with, you talk about the people who are members of your church and connected to your school with like love and respect as like brothers and sisters, not like, well, those people are always coming to my office being in the way. Like, it's just this, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this is going to go. And I know, like Pastor, you said, I've been there a little over a year. I'm still a little bit the new kid. That's okay. You're going to learn a lot about your people in this room with this vision team. And also it's now like, you're now a part of it, right? You're not like, you're the new guy, but also it's like, it's your church now too. Like not just the church that you were called to pastor. So that's pretty exciting stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. So I told Leah and Derek before we started that I hoped if someone listened to this, they would say, yeah, we're going to do this and it's going to be a good process. And I might have been, not super jazzed about it, not super excited about it, but it's one of those, I think if you hear it, at least I'm a believer, and you hear good news, you can say, yep, that's good news, right? That's in some ways what the gospel is, right? You hear it and say, yeah, that's great. I need that. And in many ways, this is a small G gospel, that this is a good thing, good news for us here at Lamb of God too. So Leah, thank you so much for your time today. I am jazzed to begin all this sort of stuff. And just, again, what, as a mentor of mine used to say, the process is more important than the outcome. That's a good leadership axiom that I try my best to live by, and abide by. And in many ways, it's much like running a marathon. At least I think I've used that analogy maybe before, that my first marathon, I've got my poster up here, which is crazy. I was 19 years old, which makes me feel really old now at 33. And anyway, the race was not that spectacular. You know, you train for it for 18 weeks and you spend a lot of time, and the race wasn't that like crazy. But then I look back and I was like, wow, the process of running from a 5K level to being able to do 26.2 miles in one go, that was the thing that was really meaningful. And yes, are all of the statements we're going to be very important? Absolutely. Like, they will guide us into the future and help us have clarity about who we are and what we're here to do. But that process of getting there, and with the 12 people from all sorts of segments, cross sections, all that sort of stuff of our congregation, and then involving people together, it's the process too that will bind us together in the statements themselves to be able to go forward and do the awesome stuff that God has planned for us here at Lamb of God. And it's maybe I shouldn't say it's what gets me out of bed, because that's the gospel of Jesus alone, but it's something that at least energizes me for the future, that I can look forward to and say, yes, let's go, let's do this. I'm ready, and I'm excited for what it's going to be like. So thank you so much for being here. I feel like I should ask you, like most podcasts say, hey, is there anywhere someone can like connect with you, or like if they want to reach out to you, that sort of thing. Like, I doubt that there'll be much like advertising, but go ahead, like give them if we want to reach out, go ahead.
If you're wondering, like, who is this person and where do I find out more, you can go to my website, which is www.leahabel.com. And it's ABEL, like Cain and Abel, not Leah Strong and Abel. And so you can find me there and kind of see a little bit more about what I do, connect with me that way. I'm on the socials, but that's more personal stuff than it is work stuff, although it's a little mixed in. I'm fairly integrated in my work and my professional life. So yeah, that's how you can find me if you want to know more, and want to reach out. I'd be happy to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We will catch you next week too, as we gather around the well that is Jesus to drink deeply from his gospel and, again, be a part of the conversation. We'll catch you next week.